Hi, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to repot two of my tuyas, this one and the one behind, and they happen to be a bit pot bound, so I thought that would be a good opportunity while I'm repotting them to talk a little bit more about pot bound plants and how to fix them. I'm sure that you've heard the term pot-bound or root-bound plant already, but in case if you haven't, plant becomes pot-bound when it's been growing in the same pot for many years and that pot just simply became too small. So all the roots start to turn around the pot, turn around themselves, creating that very tightly packed network of roots. In some severe cases, there's so many roots that there's literally no soil left. So when you water your plant, the water just passes through really easily because there's nothing that will hold moisture. If there's no soil left, there's also nothing that will hold the nutrients, so your plant can quickly become mineral deficient. In general, plants that are pot bound usually have stunted growth, their leaves start to yellow, and the plant overall looks very unhappy and very stressed. And a stressed plant, of course, attracts pests easier, it is more prone to diseases as well. So how do we fix a pot bound plant? So when you have a pot-bound plant, I guess you will find yourself in two different situations. In a situation where you have a fairly small plant that just outgrew its pot and you want to increase the size of the container to give it more space to develop, to grow bigger, to reach maturity. And the second type of situation is where you already have a fairly mature plant and you just don't want to increase the size of the container because, of course, balcony gardening has its limits and we can't all the time increase the size of the container. So you would want to keep it in the same size of pot, but it's just the roots are not fitting anymore in that pot. So what to do in these two types of situations? So I am going to increase the size of the container simply because the pot was just too small and I think that the top growth was just too heavy, and as you could see at the beginning, the pot was broken because it's just each time that there's a wind, and there's a lot of wind here basically on daily basis, but each time that there is a strong wind, this plant just falls on the floor and this time the pot broke. So I need a bigger size of container, mostly for stability, so that the bottom is heavier than the top, so that the plant can withstand heavy winds and won't fall on the floor again. But if I were to keep it in the same pot, so what would I do in case if the plant becomes pot bound but I don't want to increase the size of the container? One thing to keep in mind if you do want to keep a plant in the same container is that this container has to be reasonably large enough, because of course you don't want to grow a large tree in a very, very tiny container because that will just simply not work. But if the container is reasonably sized compared to the size of the plant that you are growing, then you can do a little bit of root pruning. Of course, you want to provide more space for the root growth and you want to have that layer of fresh soil to have some nutrients and to have some moisture retention. So what you will do is you would visually divide that root ball into 4 sections, and then what you will do, you will take a sharp saw, which I don't have at the moment, but you will take a sharp saw and you will just slice through the bottom part of these roots. So you will cut out 1 on 4. Don't go too deep. If you go too deep, if you cut, let's say, half of the roots, then you will not have enough roots to support all the top growth. You will not have enough roots to provide water and nutrients to the top growth of the plant, so the top growth will start to die back because there's not enough roots to support healthy growth. So maximum 1 on 4, 1 on 3 if you feel confident and if you have done this before, but I would say start with 1 on 4 to rejuvenate the plant, and then you will just put a layer of fresh soil at the bottom of the container. You will take your plant, plant it in the same container, and that should give you 2-3 years. Do not root prune too often, not more often than 2-3 years, because then you're just compromising the health and the growth of the plant. So every 2-3 years this should be fine. In my case, as I mentioned, I am increasing the size of the container, so I'm not gonna do a root pruning, but I do need to release the compaction because, as you see, that's a very tight network of roots, and if it's not a severe case of pot-bound plant, you can tease them out with your hand, which, as you can see, I cannot really do. I mean, I could if I forced, but it's best to just make 4 vertical cuts, just like this, with sharp pruners, just to release that compaction and to make sure that those roots are gonna spread on the sides a little bit more, rather than just turning around themselves and eventually suffocating the plant. Okay, I'm gonna turn around and make 3 or 4 more vertical cuts. And you can gently spread the roots a little, just to prevent them from going in circles again. One more. And because the bottom is also very pot bound, I'm gonna just gently tease the bottom with my hands. There's a drainage hole at the bottom, so water can drain away easily, so I am not adding any additional layer of gravel or pebbles or anything like that, because it's absolutely unnecessary. It doesn't help drainage. What I could do is to place a piece of that other broken pot just to cover the drainage hole so that the soil doesn't come out, but I don't like to do it. I just fill it in with soil, and I'm using, as usual, my favorite potting mix, which is Light Mix by Playground. I use it for most of my plants. So I'm going to fill the bottom with a bit of soil, and then I'm gonna place the plant, fill it back with soil, and top it up with mulch. Just making sure that it's well placed in the center and that it's straight. Okay, now on to this next one. Now I will just water my plants, and I will add additive Power Roots to the water. It's a potassium-based additive. I spoke many times about this product. It has multiple uses, and whenever I transplant something bigger, so some larger shrub or tree, I always add it because it does help with the transplant shock. Okay, just gonna mix it in. Okay, now that I've watered them, I'm gonna mulch them. I previously used wood chips when I had them in those smaller containers, but because I don't have wood chips anymore, the only thing that I have left are pine cones that I always use for Christmas or for like generally winter decorations. I keep them in this bag, and I'm just gonna repurpose them as mulch. Mulch is great because it helps to retain moisture. It isolates the roots in summer, protects them from heat, and in winter from frost. So also suppresses weeds, although in containers you don't really have much weeds, but it happens on occasion. So that's a great way to top dress the soil. You could use anything. You can use any pebbles. For example, here for my Japanese maple, I have some pebbles. So yeah, I use pine cones, pebbles, even preserved moss sometimes, whatever you have on hand. Okay, so it's done. One last thing that I would like to mention, I probably should have said it at the beginning of the video, but ideally when you replant a larger shrub or a bigger tree, you will want to do it when they are either dormant or semi-dormant. So that will be at the end of winter, at the beginning of spring, or in autumn when they start to enter dormancy, but when the weather is still mild enough. You don't want really to do it in the middle of summer like I did. I couldn't really wait until autumn. I couldn't leave the plant was completely exposed because of course that would compromise the health of that plant and the soil dries out really quickly, so I couldn't even water the plant properly. So that's the only reason why I replanted them in the middle of summer. Now that they are replanted, I will keep them well watered. As I mentioned, I'm using the Power Roots additives to help them with the transplant shock. And if you were to replant something in the middle of summer, you will want to keep it in partial shade, which that's naturally for me because my balcony is northeast facing. But if you do replant some bigger plant, keep it in partial shade, away from scorching sun, to pose as less stress on the plant as possible. Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed watching it and that you found it helpful. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye!